time, and I remember when was our first interaction? I want to say like 2015 or something around.
Yes, so it was 2017 actually, the
Ah,
end of
okay.
2017, early 20, and that's when I actually began my knowledge of regulatory and clinical trial research roles. So yes, you are
Jessica
correct.
Hunter, everyone, a long time Guru Nation supporter. Thank you very much, Jessica. I really appreciate it. I know I've seen you on LinkedIn, on Instagram. Long time supporter. I feel like I know you too, even though maybe we've only spoke once. But you reached out to me today. By the way, congratulations on your LLC. So I was
Thank
like,
you.
yeah, come on the pod and let's share some of the love and get you some clients and get you some notoriety around what you're doing. I think it's important that we raise awareness around what we're doing, and maybe we'll start with that. Like, what do you have to announce today? And then we'll work backwards to get into your career too, because I think it's actually could be inspiring for other members of Guru Nation. Maybe the next Jessica is out there just starting in 2017 for her is
That's
2024.
That is so true. I appreciate you for saying that because that's also a part of why I established my LLC is to share the knowledge that I've gained because it's not a field of work that I grew up knowing about. So it took me to be exposed to it by way of an office out of Shreveport, Louisiana, where I am originally from, Omni Fertility. It was there I was working as a office assistant, and the doctor there began doing drug trials. So I went from scheduling appointments, prior authorization to actually being a part of a drug trial as a clinical trial assistant. And I learned about regulatory documentation. So it began my uh, interest in the research field, actually prompted me to go back to school at that time to get a bachelor's of science in human and social services administration from Wiley University in Marshall, Texas. And so, with that bachelor's of science, I was able to navigate my way a little bit into the regulatory realm. Worked at a pharmaceutical distribution company out of Shreveport as well before moving to Dallas and tapped into the research roles remotely. So it has been a interesting journey because, like I said, you hear so much about being an attorney, a nurse, a doctor, a professor growing up, but within my field, I have learned it is a mix with the legal realm and life science and biotechnology. So I am happy to actually speak with you about that because you just said congratulations for the LLC, but a part of that is not just to gain clients and contracts, but it's also to share the knowledge I've gained. So thank you.
I think no, thank you. Then thank you for reaching out today. I think you are doing this in a timely point in our industry where there's massive layoffs going on. Not so much at the sites, but at the sponsors and CROs. And it looks like you worked a fair amount of time with a site. So as a cancer research, um, well, there was a sponsor. So you've had some time at the sponsors and even some of the tech vendors. Was it the last one that you were
Yes, it was.
working
It
with?
was.
Um, what do you think about like what is your reaction to the wave of layoffs recently? Basically
Mhm.
everywhere except sites. I think some sites are going through layoffs too, but most sites that I know are still busy and there's still studies coming up and they're still short-staffed. But certainly the CROs, there's no
Yes.
denying they're
Yes,
having layoffs.
I agree. I think it's just the specialty area within whatever department, may be experiencing those layoffs. So I think it's just for the definite area of expertise in those areas. So that's what may be leading towards the layoff.
What advice do you have for someone maybe they're just trying to get started
Hmm.
or maybe they've been laid off? Like
Hmm.
you really took the long route to
Hmm.
accomplishing what you've done and you've got your master's degree as well and your regulatory affairs. We're going to get into a lot of the reg affairs and the specialties that you have, but what advice would you give to somebody watching right now that either just got laid off or is having a hard time finding a job right now in this space?
I would say be open to other areas within clinical research, regulatory compliance, and pharmacovigilance. Be open to training available, not just in your core working area. So I would just say be open and don't be afraid to explore different roles.
When you did it,
Hmm.
so, well, let's start with you. I'm going to kind of jump back and forth across your career timeline. What made you want to start your LLC, the independent contractor? Because that is some advice that I do give to people like, hey, you know what? There's nothing more rewarding, in my opinion, than working for yourself. But
Yes,
you can't just do that out the gate. You have to build up your expertise, and you've done so since 2017. It looks like started out
hmm
as, like you said, office assistant at a fertility
yes.
clinic. Was that a IVF clinic or what kind of fertility was that?
So infertility,
Okay.
it was a fertility office, and so there were drug trials going on with various sponsors that help to shrink fibroids, and they deal with oncology and tumors. So
Mm.
that was my first experience into the clinical research world.
And what did you think about that when you got started? Like, was that ever on your radar to do clinical research?
It was not. So I always knew I liked healthcare, but I knew what I didn't want to do. See, I knew what I didn't want to do, but I didn't know that this was out there. In my area, it's not very much discussed. These type of roles in pharmaceutical regulatory compliance, pharmacovigilance, clinical research assistants, coordinators, CRAs. But it actually took a CRA to explain to me, hey, you already have a documentation skill. You should go back to school, which is what I did to get the
So a
bachelor's.
CRA,
Yeah.
so okay, so at this fertility clinic where you guys were doing like uterine fibroid stuff, some
Mhm.
oncology stuff, you guys had studies and the CRA saw something in you. What do you think
Yes.
she saw in you? Like what was
That
it that she saw?
well, I already had the administrative, skill of documentation and actually going through the ICAs, the good clinical practices portion of prior to the trial starting. She knew I was aware of what it takes for a drug trial to be well documented. So, alongside being the office assistant, that clinical trial assistant role, it allowed me to learn even more after getting that good clinical practice training and observing her coming in and out of the office. I'm like, well, I know who works in this office. So at that time, I was not aware of her role. I was not aware, and I began asking questions,
Ah.
and she was not afraid to tell me. So I truly appreciate that.
Oh, so you were curious and you
Yes,
asked her.
very much so. Hey, um, why do you only come in 2 or 3 times? Like what is going on?
So no one told you you worked at a site, but nobody told you this.
They told me about the capacity of what was going on, but I wanted to ask her directly, hey, what exactly is your role? What do you do? I didn't know. I was clueless. So it really helped me to learn about a field I was not aware about. I had always heard of drug trials because you see the commercials. Well, I did at one point, more so about, hey, if you're interested in a drug study, like the classic lines. But to actually experience it and see her come in, it was life changing, actually.
Did you ever think back then, 2017, and honestly, it's not that long ago, 2024, you'd have your own LLC, being an independent contractor. Did you ever foresee that back then?
I did not, because I didn't realize the skill I would be learning, and how it could be used. So I did not. All I wanted to do is find an area and a role that I could learn. And I feel like I'm still learning. I actually do. Even though I did finish my Juris Master in June the 4th,
Congrats.
which was not,
Congratulations.
that was a month ago. But it taught me how to use my analysis and my legal writing skills in the life sciences. So it really has joined together my prior working experience and my education. And I'm thankful because it's not like I watched your previous podcast. Was it early in this week or last week? People go to school and have no skill, but I'm thankful that I actually knew what I was going to school for and what it would bring to me. So I think that the way I'm going to say the way God set that up for me, He gave me the experience and the knowledge, and I knew what to look for prior to obtaining a graduate level degree. So
I think
I'm
that's the key because what you picked, it was probably intentional.
yes, it very intentional. I spent 3 years trying to find the right school that would directly align and mesh my career path. So it was very intentional, and I'm not ashamed to say that. I mean, I'm very observant on that picking up on what I need. So it was the right program. I mean, some of the courses that I've taken, biotechnology and the law, fraud and corruption in the life sciences,
Mm.
compliance issues. I mean, it has directly meshed everything that I have come to know and things that are coming into the future.
Eh, I'm so glad you said that because a lot of people think I'm anti-education. I'm not. I am completely for it when you do it the way
Hmm.
you just did it.
Hmm.
Because you didn't just stumble into a degree,
No, no, no. And things have changed so much since even when I began watching your channel, because at that time the infertility office was using paper documentation. He had not crossed over to electronic management systems for clinical trials. It wasn't until I left and went to Dallas actually for a bit that I began working with systems that were already, crossed over from from paper documentation to the electronic form. So I have learned a lot, and I'm actually glad I got a chance to work with paper a bit because it did give me a better understanding.
yeah, me too. I think paper gives you, like, paper makes the fundamentals seem easier because, like, all our staff in Yuma Clinical Trial, they just start with Creo. Like, that's what we
Hmm.
use.
Hmm.
But I think having that experience in paper kind of makes it more tangible. It kind of breaks down the fundamentals somehow into more than just a computer screen.
Yeah, the process, yeah, it does. It helps you learn the process, and you can actually see the trail better. It's the same technically with the electronic signaturing and things, but paper does. I'm glad I got my start with paper. I'm gonna say that.
Yeah, I think it helps compartmentalize at least in your head. Like this is what the source is, this is what informed consent. Because if
Hmm.
everything's electronic, I mean, I guess you can compartmentalize also, but to me it was easier to learn like having it on paper first. Like my first
Yes.
decade and a half, I didn't really switch to electronic systems till like 2018. So
Hmm.
prior to that, it was all paper. But Seton Hall University School of Law, Juris Master in Pharmaceutical and Medical Device Law and Compliance. This is one of the most sought after, especially for consultants, skill set. Like
Hmm.
reg affairs, I can't tell you, Jessica, enough. Like with our startup CRO, we have some IIT projects. We are always being asked, and shout out to Robert Goldman. Do you know Robert, by the way? Have you? He's
No, I
like our
don't.
reg affairs guy, but he's self-taught. He's a doctor.
Wow.
He's a MD, but in
Okay.
the US he's licensed. He's not licensed in the US, but he was a MD, foreign trained, became a CRA, then worked his way up to study director, and he learned reg affairs like just by doing.
Hmm.
In your case, you've done it by doing and by the education. So we're always looking to collaborate with, especially like the up and coming reg affairs. There's not enough people doing this. Like
And things
there's
are
not.
changing. Things are changing. School taught me that things are changing. Even with the topic of the biosimilars, that was something that was a hot topic in my graduate school program. So biosimilars are very much so buzzing right now. So I would add that.
Why? What's buzzing about the biosimilar?
I feel because the full explanation to consumer, I think it needs to be publicized a little bit more because I know for sure if it was discussed heavily in my discussion board, it's going to be a hot topic for the consumer and consumer safety. So you have your generic drug, which is a copy, but biosimilars they do vary. It differs. So I think the understanding for the consumer will be a key point in pushing a biosimilar to the consumer.
hmm And one of the things that I learned through investing, which
Hmm.
losing a lot of money, and then through just following the biotech space is I don't think it's the 510, I think it's the 501c or something pathway where it's the repurposing a generic drug for something else. So
Hmm.
you see a lot of these trials at the site level too. Like this drug used to be used for, I'm just making it up, fibromyalgia, but now, and it's already approved, but now we're going to try to use it for asthma. And we're
Hmm.
reformulating the molecule used to be a pill, now we're making it an inhaler.
Hmm.
So we don't need to do safety data anymore, but we got to do the efficacy data or dose finding, like if it's a new formulation, we got to do a dose finding study. And of course they do safety too, but this is like an attractive area for biotechs to invest in because it's a shortcut a little bit.
Hmm.
But there is more competition in this space as well. So I'm invested in one right now, whether it's no secret I put on YouTube, Aquestive Therapeutics. They have Listerine strip epinephrine for people that have like allergic reactions and anaphylactic shock. So instead
Hmm.
of carrying around like an EpiPen where you
Hmm.
like, let's say you have a peanut allergy and you accidentally get exposed, you got to
Hmm.
stick yourself with this big needle, right? Like in your thigh, and it's an
Yes.
EpiPen. Like people with allergies got to carry these things around. Well, now they have they reformulated it, the
Hmm.
epinephrine, into a Listerine strip type of thing. So you just, if you have an attack, you or someone else can put it under your tongue or by your cheek.
Hmm.
It's gonna hopefully gonna be approved. I'm an investor. I didn't work on any of the trials, but
Hmm.
there's so much of this going on, and this is like a relatively recent law that the FDA or loophole that the FDA maybe like a decade ago or a decade and a half ago, and we're seeing a lot of innovation. So all that is reg affairs like 510K pathways for devices. I mean,
Hmm.
if you need someone who knows what they're talking about and knows what they're doing, that's Jessica right here. She's got her LLC now. What are some of the clients you're looking to either work for or looking to attract?
Yes, yes. So, with the skill of legal analysis and writing, I can amend the documentation for contracting. So, I'm not just solely for pharmaceutical services. I can, amend contracts legally, just in general. So I would like to say that. But pharmaceutical compliance assessment and risk management, risk analysis and compliance, those are the clients that I'm looking to obtain, because I do feel like that's where my strength is in risk assessment. Actually looking at the structure of a company or organization site and helping them to resolve any areas that may need resolving with compliance issues. So I do feel
Mm,
like risk management and analysis is where my strength is. And that's what I'm looking to, incorporate virtually or on site. So I am in northern Louisiana, but I have been working remotely for 3 years now. So I'm open to working with any site organization, remotely.
that's awesome. I love Louisiana too, by the way. For the sites, let's go with sites first, and then maybe we'll go to like a small biotechs or small sponsors.
Mhm.
For the sites, like what's the biggest mistake you see them making when it comes to compliance and like quality compliance, quality control, quality assurance, whatever you want to call it? What's like the biggest mistakes
in,
that they make?
in, in generally, I would say starting with training. I think if you don't initiate the core understanding ahead of time, training for employees, I think that is the first mistake in ensuring a long-term benefit of, hey, this is quality work, this is quality documentation, this is a quality service. So I would say training for the employee, that's the first mistake, because the consumer can only do so much. I think it starts with the actual site company, and
The
that actually that's a
training.
that's an answer for all across the board, for sites, research companies, research institutions, hospitals. I think if you train your employees, your contractors, your consultants, that's going to start, an increase of quality work and understanding.
Yeah, it's funny because these sites, I try. I mean, there's a shortage of sites. That's how we started the episode.
Mhm.
There's a shortage of staff working at these sites.
Mhm.
And a lot of sites like refuse to believe that. So they try to hire someone that they think has experience, but
Mhm.
the person actually doesn't. Maybe they worked like 3 months at another site. You're not really
Mhm.
gonna learn anything. And if that site didn't train you, what
Mhm.
do you really know? Like maybe you know how to make a lot of mistakes. I mean, you don't know much. This is one of the reasons we started the CRC Academy. But
Mhm.
I do think sites, and I'm not perfect. Like we train our staff, we put everyone through CRC Academy. I try to one-on-one train every employee, at
Mhm.
least until now. I've been one-on-one training every employee, but you don't get, as a business owner, I don't get a return on my employee
Mhm.
until like 6 to 9 months in. Like,
That's
and
true.
that's for the good ones. Like, and then sometimes they leave. Like I just had one, Jessica. She was like a great phlebotomist that we started training, and I told her at the interview, "Hey, we're gonna pay like less than what you can probably make, but if you stick around like 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, you start making more than those other places. But that's the way we reduce our risk." She was okay
Mhm.
with it, but then she got hired for a non-research job where they paid her a lot more.
Mhm.
It's understandable, but that's going to
Yeah.
happen as a site when you're hiring people from scratch and then training them from scratch. So,
Yes.
what do you think sites should actually do? Like, obviously they can join CRC Academy, but not everyone's going to do that. Like, what
Mhm.
are some ways they can actually train their staff better?
Wow, that's a great question. I would say there's going to be risk with anything with anyone. I think it just it's up to the person to find what they truly want to pursue. It has to be in them to say, hey, this is just where I want to be. So I would start with that statement,
Yeah,
but
motivation.
I would, and so I would say in order for you to have your site the way you want to have it, I would not hold back on your training because, I mean, even if someone may leave, you still need to know that you train them up to your standards that you want for your site or whatever role that is. So I wouldn't say don't hold back just because there's a chance someone may leave. So I would start with that statement because at the end of the day, uh, research is about documentation and patients and consumer safety and all of that. So that's something that I don't feel should be held back just because.
Like how much of when you got started at that fertility clinic stays with you now in your consulting work? Like, how were you onboarded? What could have been done better? What was good? What was done that was good? And what could have done, how could it have been better, do you think?
I think that right now, some places are truly um, migrating to systems that they never worked with before. And so you may have people that may be very knowledgeable in like audit preparedness, whereas my experience may be more so of a system based like Encore and Viva, but some
Mm.
people are still working with systems, or I don't want to say systems, or maybe like use Microsoft Excel, for example. Some people may be still more Excel based. Whereas industry companies that have been around, long, maybe a longer time, they're fully working with clinical trial management systems and Oracle Argus and safety management systems. So I want to go back to the training piece that you mentioned, training your coordinators or your sites or whatever role, your regulatory compliance officers, according to what you need that role to be. I think is very key to where things are going now. Because me working at a pharmaceutical distribution company that dealt more so with FDA compliance, whereas my roles in the last 3 years have dealt more with ICH, GCP, on this end on FDA. I'm sorry, the pharmaceutical company dealt with the DEA side of
Mm.
pharmaceutical compliance. So mixing my experience with the DEA and the FDA, I'm seeing how the industry is different, maybe governmental wise and then industry wise. So it's shown me like even communication going back to COVID. Something I feel strongly about is communication was not efficient enough when COVID first hit, because I do feel it was slow to get to pharmaceutical industries that were actually receiving requests for any type of COVID remedy prior to a COVID vaccine being founded or funded or released to the consumer. So I
Hmm.
don't. I think that's an area with drug development that is lacking, and I hope that it increases actually.
Yeah, during COVID, you were pharmaceutical compliance officer,
Yes.
risk assessment to monitor and track products, maintain SOPs. After that, you went to the cancer center, which
Hmm.
was a site, right? That's a site.
Hmm. Hmm.
And you were a regulatory affairs specialist, so you facilitated the regulatory IRB, GCP, SAEs.
And
So you've
that was
got
my
a
experience in the big world of research. It's different doing a clinical trial assistant role, whereas you're just doing the binder and ensuring the dates are right and the documentation is in the right place and listening to the doctor doing the consent. And I did actually get a chance to demo what the study is about to the participants. So that was my first time actually being on site and working and getting a chance to speak with people, because as of the last few years, I've been doing remote work. So that was very, very interesting, actually.
Yeah, it looks like it. Like you have a pretty diverse skill set now. And then after that, you went on to be safety project operations coordinator, regulatory translational coordinator at was this a
Research center.
sponsor? CRO? Insight
It was a
Global?
site. Yeah, it's a
Site.
site.
Okay, that's
That's
a
a site.
site.
Hmm.
And then safety. Now you went to a pro pharma group. Is that a CRO or a
They're like a contract organization, and they have consultants in
ah
various fields. So
safety operations coordinator, pharmacovigilance?
yes.
And then you went to where you're a vendor management associate. So you've basically worked with all different kinds of systems.
Well, I've been independent since 2022, so that was
Ah,
already
okay.
established. Yeah, it's just now that I'm out of school, I want to get more in depth into it. So school was
Ah, okay.
tedious, so it's been established since 2022.
But congrats though with graduating with the master's and now you have the education to match the experience. And
Mhm.
what have been your feedback so far from clients, or have you been able to get clients so far?
Well, I will say yes, and it's more just being legal documentation revision and reviewing the documentation and resolving any issues within documentation. So it's just been within the documentation realm. So I'm looking to pick up some compliance roles. So I hope to do that soon.
A lot of biotechs right now looking for
Hmm.
that kind of stuff. There's a patent cliff coming with the pharma by next 26, I believe, and they're going to
Hmm.
either need to merge with a bunch of other pharma or acquire a bunch of biotech. So, yeah, I think the like for contractors,
Hmm.
consultants, I think you're seeing the opposite of what the employees, there's been a lot of layoffs lately,
Hmm.
hiring freezes, but on the contracting side, and
Hmm.
especially you're like positioned well. You've worked with tech systems and vendors, and
Hmm.
now you've got the masters along with the regulatory affairs experience. There's a lot that you actually can probably do. So anyone interested should contact Jessica. Her LinkedIn is underneath and in the show notes. Um, any last things you want to add?
I would say I feel like I'm still learning. Out of all of this, I feel like I'm still learning. Even in the last role, I had never done a audit preparation at all. So I knew how to prepare regulatory documentation to submit to the IRB sponsor site,
Hmm.
answer email communication, and work within systems. But actually preparing an audit slide and audit information, it was so new to me. So it's something that I did
Who
learn.
got audited by who?
No, no.
Was it
No,
like a site?
the processes of everything was
Ah, I
for
see.
whatever vendor service that needed to be, taken care of,
Because the
preparing
people don't
documents.
understand that the vendors get
Yeah,
audited too. Like
yes,
that's people assume it's just the sites and the
no,
sponsors, but the
the
vendors.
services, the vendors. Yes, so this past
Huh.
experiences I've had, it has taught me so much that I didn't know in those regulatory and safety operations roles, because I do feel I was comfortable in those roles, although they were a contract. But
Mm.
actually learning vendor audit preparation, I was like, okay, yeah, so it's really, really coming together now.
Wow.
It is. Yeah.
All my tech homies that have startups, you need to talk to Jessica because you guys can get audited too.
Oh, no.
What's the biggest mistake they make? The tech vendors. What is the usually the biggest mistake they make?
So I would say my experience that I've had, I can only speak on like pharmaceutical services. There were some that deal with imaging, and so I'm just going to say that just having your documentation together, I think that's the most important thing. Just making sure documentation is well put together.
Yeah, that's a good point because we usually think of audits, at least me, sites, but
Mhm.
vendors can get audited, and it's by the FDA, right? The FDA will
Well, it
audit the.
depends on whatever. No, 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 not just the FDA, but actual, places can audit depending on the infraction. So
Oh,
it's not just audited by the FDA, but other entities can as well.
well, you learn new stuff all the time. Tech
Yes,
vendors, contact Jessica ASAP. Her
yes.
LinkedIn is underneath. I'm going to introduce you to Robert Goldman soon once he gets back. Maybe we'll have you on a Guru Nation After Dark as well.
Okay.
Um, Thank you very much for coming on and congrats on everything. And hopefully the LLC really takes off for you and you're able to help a lot of people out and provide some value out there. But it's always a pleasure to have a long time Guru
Yes.
Nation
I mean, before I
faithful.
even gained any experience, I was watching this YouTube channel. So
I
it's been a long
remember you. I
I'm
remember
saying
you.
years, but it's not been that long actually. So things have happened at a fast pace. So
Well, congrats to you. Really proud of the success I have. I know we've been interacted on Instagram a lot
yeah,
too. Congrats on your success.
thank you.
And thank you for coming on. Everybody go connect with her right now. Jessica Hunter. Her LinkedIn is underneath. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Bye bye.
Thank you.